The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, welcome to yet another Wednesday in September. We're flying through the year, but I'm really pleased that you could set aside the time today to join us on a webinar on a topic that you guys asked for. And it's all about staff retention and setting your teams up for success. And to deliver the content, we're welcoming back Jo Hanlon from Mind Your P's, who is a business and coaching consultant. She's delivered a couple of really interesting topics for us, you know, the reframing the mind, the mind mosaic. And today she's going to be talking about staff retention. We will be recording the webinar and we'll PDF the slides and we'll put them up on the AFTR website because we always get requests to look at the content again. And we'll do some questions at the end, but I'll hand you over now to Jo and let her take us through the content for today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jo. It's lovely to be back with you all, and I look forward to, thank you for letting me come back again and asking me, and I'm looking forward to sharing some more ideas with you again today. I really appreciate, again, just want to say thank you to those on the line who did connect with me after our last webinar, and thank you again for the feedback that I got, because it's always incredibly useful for me to know what's valuable to you and what's not. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about setting your team members up for success, and with the easiest measure of that being staff retention, obviously. So as you're aware, your staff, and some of you may be listening, are usually both your biggest risk, apart from COVID, as we know, as well as your biggest asset. And many of you would have found that it actually takes a considerable amount of time and effort and investment and a bit of anxiety, blood, sweat and tears, hopefully not too much blood, to recruit and retain great team members. And the problem is sometimes we lose them just when they're starting to add real value to your business. Sometimes you can't do anything about that because it's situational, but other times you can. So my aim today is to provide you with some ideas and to look into some ways how you might be able to, better set your staff up for success, and for them, for you, and for your business, and also just to retain them. So I've got about 10 tips for you, fairly jam-packed. My pace is usually relatively fast, and none of them are rocket science, but hopefully there's some new ideas or some new perspectives that you might want to pick and choose from and put in action for your teams in the short, medium or longer term. And it doesn't matter what business you're in, because these are all really relevant, and really what our goal is to make being at work a more enjoyable and fulfilling experience for everybody, because it's not much fun. So I guess oh, here we go. Why can't I move slides?
We're frozen, have we, Jo?
My slides, I can't work out how to move my slides.
Maybe go out of presenter mode and try again.
Hang on, I think I can go. There we go. I think I can get into that one, and usually I'm okay after that. All right, beautiful. So, all right. So just out of interest, I thought this might be an interesting thing for you. There's a common assumption that employees today, especially the millennial crowd and younger, that's born after 1982, are frequent job hoppers. And that they quit or change jobs way more than past generations did, and that they're typically always on the lookout for a new career rather than staying loyal. But what you might find surprising, and I know I did, is that this assumption is statistically incorrect, according to some data that I found on Business to Business Kununu.com blog, which states that back in 1983, the average employee tenure was around 3.5 years. Today's average employee tenure is 5.1 years. And that's great news, right? I would have thought so. But I'm sure it's a little consolation to those that are facing frequent turnover of staff, and it doesn't probably feel like that. But I guess if we dig deeper into what makes up those average employee tenure statistics, we'll find a multitude of factors. And notwithstanding our current pandemic scenario, but things like industry, age, gender, education, ethnicity, those all play a role in determining how long people stay. So it's not always going to be your fault. So please don't beat yourself up. One of the notes there is a lack of career growth is one of the biggest reasons that workers leave their jobs, and that's second only to low pay. And some people say, well, what have I, yes, managers are the people that run business or business leaders, but there's plenty of other things that you can actually do to make a great environment for your staff to stay. So let's jump into the tips that I have for you. Okie dokie. So one of the first things is it starts with your workforce plan. And this is all even before you might have a vacancy. So it pays to plan up front. What often happens is somebody leaves, and as an employer, we think, oh, we've got to replace that person straight away. Depending on how big your business is, it may actually pay you to just stop and think about, is that the best situation or the best role to have at the moment? Is it still meeting your needs, or maybe do you need to look at setting your workforce up a little bit differently? The other thing too is when you are looking for getting new staff, and I'm sure a lot of you already do this, and again, I'm just reiterating, none of this is teaching any of you how to suck eggs. It's really just bringing some of that from the unconscious to the conscious, maybe a little more. But a lot of people now also are finding that a balance of attitude as well as skills and general competencies are important. So pay a bit of attention to that before you just jump into the recruitment mode, and actually think about what works for you with the staff that you have got, what's been incredibly useful and helpful, and what's worked really well for you in the business versus what you might be thinking, oh, I need to get somebody with that skill or that competency, because you can't teach attitude, but you certainly can teach skills and competencies. So what I do is I put a list of key competencies and capabilities together before I start recruiting, and I also then, when I'm doing interviews, put them into what I call a comparison table. So when you're actually interviewing your key staff, you can actually put the names down, or the key applicants, you can put their names down, and you can rate them independently on each of the key competencies and capabilities, 1 out of 10. What I have done is I've sent Jo a copy of my PDF copy of my slides, but I've also sent her an example comparison table which she could send on to you. So that's an Excel spreadsheet, and you can use it how you'd like to. But one good thing about it, this helps avoid discrimination claims, because if anyone says, oh, he or she chose somebody else over me because of this characteristic I had, if you've got a comparison table and you can actually show that you've been really objective in your assessment, and the person or people that you've decided to take on are clearly the higher raters, it really helps you. It also means you've got a common base to work with, and if you're seeing a lot of people, sometimes it can be really quite difficult to keep track of who had what competency or what attitude or whatever. So I find putting it on paper and just using a comparison table really helpful. The other thing is make sure you've got some planned questions. I find what often happens in interviews is that the business owner takes over, they talk all about their business, and because often very people are nervous, they spend a lot of time saying, this is what we want, this is what we do, this is what we're looking for, and half an hour's up, and you've hardly talked at all to the person who you're interviewing. So if you've got some set questions, and you use those again as a basic framework to guide your interview, don't want it to be question 1, 2, 3, 4, but just weave those questions into your interview process. You'll again find that will give you structure, and it will give you the opportunity to compare apples with apples, rather than having different conversations all over the place depending on how enthusiastic you are and how far off track you go. And I know it's very easy for that to happen, but having those questions just can really help. One of the questions I find really useful as a business owner is saying to people, so tell me about the best manager you've ever had. And by getting people to tell you about the best manager, you can then quickly work out whether they need a lot of supervision, ideally, or whether you just set them up, train them up front, and then let them get on with it. It's a question that a lot of people don't ask, but I find gives a lot of information for ongoing work style and how they're going to fit with your style of management. The other thing is be really aware of your branding as an employer. A lot of people don't think about this. So, try and convey as much about your business as possible when you're putting the ad up online. It talks about using even your ad wording, the colour, the branding, if you're going to be using that. And if you clearly communicate what type of business you are, what your values are, those types of things, it avoids disappointment. I remember years ago I was involved in a senior recruitment for an organisation, and they were way out in West Sydney, and it was quite an old, dilapidated office, yet they interviewed this key and senior manager in one of the top flash suites in a recruiting company in the middle of Sydney looking over Sydney Harbour. And this person was planning to relocate from New York. When they got to Australia, they got the job, they ended up having to go to work out at West Sydney. They hated it because their expectation was that they were actually going to an office that was very similar to where they'd been interviewed. I know it seems like quite a strange thing, but it's really important, I think, for the candidates to see where they're going to be working, who the team is they're going to be working with, and then you get a much more congruent fit as to whether they're going to fit and whether you're going to fit, the team are going to fit with them. Remember to be legally compliant in your ad. You can't ask, there's various questions you can't ask, so it's really important that you're very clear in what you can and can't ask. And if you're not sure about that, reach out to your industry association, like somebody like myself, whatever, or do some reading. The other thing I encourage you to do is not to hire a clone of yourself. It's really important to have diversity in the people that you have in your team, and they add a lot of value to your business, and not everybody all your clients are going to gel with you, so having a variety of staff means that you'll have a variety of personalities that could work differently. And we've talked in previous webinars about personality types and things like that. The last thing on this point, if you can get your team member involved in the recruitment process, it's fantastic, because people that work there feel that their opinion really matters. And if they're going to be working with this new person or new people, you really want to make sure, as I just mentioned, that everybody gets on and that they like each other, because that also means that they'll probably be a much more helpful and positive part of the welcoming party rather than feeling threatened or concerned. Okay. This is one of those I unlock it. Okay. Alrighty. Alrighty. So the second part, I don't want that. Get rid of that. All right. Tip 2, onboarding and training. I think this is a really important thing to think about. So because recruitment is one part of it, but then when somebody turns up for their first day, it's a really great idea to have, I know this seems like a really basic step, but have the office and the space that they're going to be using set up and ready for them to use. So many times I've seen people arrive at a desk, arrive in a business, and they've basically got to clear the space for themselves. They've got to try and get rid of the previous person's rubbish, whether it's in the drawers or on the desk, or even dusting, tidying. There's nothing more unwelcoming, I suppose, to turn up and have to clean up somebody else's mess first. So something small like that can make that person feel much more welcome, and make sure that you've got them equipment that's going to be workable. A broken chair is not helpful, nor is an ancient computer if that's what's going to be they're going to be using. So make sure that they've got the tools that they need to make them feel welcome and to set them up well. If in this age the person's going to be working from home, again, make sure they have everything that they need to be safe, comfortable, and to be able to work productively. It's a good idea to get them to send you a photo of their workspace, and make sure that it's a good idea to send them a working from home work health and safety checklist. There are a number of those available online if you don't have one yourself. You are an employer, you do have a work health and safety obligation to your staff. Therefore, it's important that you set them up to be working safely and comfortable. You don't want to end up with a bad back problem, them having a bad back problem because they haven't got themselves set up right. So it's really important that you do that. Another thing for onboarding and training, make sure everybody has a clearly defined role and responsibility list, and that's including you as a leader. If the person's new to the industry and they have really no idea how the industry works, it's even going to be more important they understand the different roles, the different decision-making points, escalation points, what job is part of whose role, and what their decision-making scope is, because otherwise it can be very bewildering. So if you have that documented, it can be really helpful. But often the business leader forgets about their own job description and having that defined very clearly. So make sure that you do that for any new people. So even if the people are familiar with the industry, it's still a great idea. It gets them up and running a lot more quickly because they know who to come to for what information. So many businesses I talk to who are unhappy with new team members simply welcome the team member, give them a few books to read, a cursory run through a computer system, and then leave them to do their job. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for everybody. Some people are fantastic at sink or swim, and if they're a real pro in the industry, then that's fantastic. But if you're taking on younger, newer people, it's a really good idea to match your training with their level of experience or competency. And then the more competent they become, then the more, as their skill level raises, your level of attention and training can decrease. So it's about not treating everybody the same and put them in the place, set, forget, because otherwise that person has no idea of what's expected of them in your business. Because even if they're familiar with the business and the industry, it may be that they don't know you and how you work and your idiosyncrasy. So that's also really important to let them understand about your culture. So they can be feeling more welcome, they can feel more successful in your eyes, as well as feel more fulfilled in their jobs. So the other thing too is get on top of them with some KPIs and say, these are the KPIs and these are the measures of success. These are the things that we look at, and this is how they link to the business metrics, and make sure that that everybody knows what's important to the business and how you're going to be looking at them. So provide them with a support crew or a buddy if you can. If you can't be around all the time, or if you're busy, if you give them a buddy they can talk to who's not necessarily you or the business owner, then there's somebody else that your new staff can talk to and get some ideas and information from. Check in with them regularly, even just 5 minutes a day, just to check in and make sure they're okay. Will make them feel cared for, and it allows you to keep an eye on how they're going, but without micromanaging them. You don't want to micromanage because that keeps people dependent on you. And if you've brought somebody on board to do a certain number of jobs so that you can be released to do others, but you keep micromanaging them because you're worried that they're not going to do it right, or if they make a mistake, then it's, they don't develop. You feel you wasted your money, and therefore it's really important to put in place some structure and some steps that you can train them, you can watch what they do, let them do it, let them come back and check with you until they gain competency and move on. It's a basic way of training and teaching people how to do things. If we go back to the point at the start, we've said smaller organisations sometimes lose staff because there's not a lot of space to grow or a lot of hierarchical opportunities. The other way you can do it in smaller organisations is set people up as subject matter experts. So I'm assuming you do a lot of that anyway, but that's a great way to keep people, because if they're a subject matter expert on a particular continent or type of travel or whatever that is, then they're likely to feel that they've got more ownership. Alrighty, number 3, have a clear purpose or vision. I talked about this in my last webinar. So this is about having something that's going to connect to your employee's heart. These days people are really looking for something, and say something like having a purpose like, we're committed to making sure our clients have the best time, but in an environmentally sustainable way. If that was a purpose or a vision for your business, you're likely again to start connecting and attracting staff that are going to connect to that, and that will also help in getting through to your clients and to the ones that specifically identify with that feeling or that sense of purpose as well. Millennials especially are wanting to be connected to social cause and want to make an impact both in and outside their workplace. And a Deloitte Millennial Global Survey showed that companies that are genuinely involved in and show support for local charitable causes give their employees the feeling of making a difference and are much more attractive to work for. So even if your work isn't directly tackling a massive problem, you can still get staff involved by organising things like food drives for employees, or get a group to participate in fundraising for local charities, or recycle at work, or set up a donation box in the office. Those are some of the small things that can make people feel very connected to your business from the heart, and make sure that it's not just something there to make the business owner money, for an example, but that there is a genuine connection back to the community. And with a focus, once you have a clear purpose and set of goals to help people stay focused, make sure that your KPIs, their individual KPIs, are actually linked back to those key strategies. And so people will know when they're doing things right. So they can identify, and if you ask them, what do you feel are your top priorities, they should be able to tell you, these are my top priorities and this is why, and these are the objectives that I'm aiming for to support the business and being successful. So have visual cues and brain prompts on the wall, on computer screens to remind each person of the vision, what your values are, what your goals are, and make sure that employees genuinely understand how what they're doing links through to what the business goals are. And if you can do that, that really does mean that people understand that if they're not able to do their job or they're feeling disconnected, that there is an impact on the rest of the team, not just themselves. Okay, tip 4. This is something that's really interesting. It's easy for business owners or senior managers, team leaders to blame others when they're thinking or doing things differently to you. We've touched on different styles and different work preferences previously. And often when I get called in by my clients to work on problem staff, I often have conversations with the business leaders or managers so that they reflect back on what they might be doing, because as we know, interactions between people are two-way, they're not just one way. So it's really important that the business managers actually persist in thinking, okay, what can I do differently? What is it that I might be doing that's causing this problem? It's not just a nuisance staff member or whatever, but it's how can we actually work together to make this really work. I've got this book here, I Am the Problem, that you can see, and I've set as a prize. I'm holding this up, I'm not sure if you can see. I've got a copy of it. And essentially, I'm happy to give that away as a prize to the first person who reaches out to me on LinkedIn and tells me why they feel they could really benefit from this. So there'll be some that go, oh, no, I don't want to do that, and others that go, yeah, I really want to. And I think it takes quite a lot of courage to actually reflect and think, what can I do differently and what can I do better? So wonderful book. And as I mentioned, I'm really happy to give a copy away as a for those of you that might be thinking she just wants to get more of us to connect, it's not about that. It's actually me wanting to contribute to you and give you a book that might help you. But leaders set the tone for everything that happens in their organisations. So you need to maybe reflect on what tone you're setting and is it the one you want? And you might need to look at changing your behaviour and remember about the growth mindset, which I've talked about last time, which is being open to continually learning, growing and remaining curious. Tip 5, staying connected with your team as a team and as an individual or as individuals. It's really important. I know a lot of business managers, business owners, they may have had staff for a very long time, and sometimes that can become a problem because sometimes they find it really hard to have a dividing line between being a manager and being a friend. And often when you're in a small business, you spend a lot of time together at work, and therefore you get to know each other very, very well. However, if there are performance issues that come up and you as a manager need to deal with that, if you haven't put in place some type of boundary or some type of arm's length relationship, sometimes that can be problematic in addressing those issues with that individual. So, and I know that in smaller towns, regional areas, not just that, but in some businesses that's very hard. So if you can maintain some type of arm's length perspective, it's easier on both parties because then each person doesn't take it personally or as personally if there are performance issues or a tough discussion needs to be had. It's important to show genuine interest in your staff member, obviously, and what's happening to them, and genuinely appreciate it, but do be aware of trying to maintain some healthy boundaries between being a manager and being a friend. It doesn't mean that you can't share yourself and what's happening, because being vulnerable is a really important part of building trust as part of a team. But at the same time, just know what's reasonable and what might be a little bit too much information. So just be appropriate about that. Another one is giving and asking for feedback regularly. I know a lot of managers think they get plenty of feedback, but a lot of employees go, I never hear from my manager about how I'm going. So that's one of the biggest reasons when I'm talking to employees who are feeling a little unhappy. It's about them feeling unappreciated, and they don't even know what's working and what's not working well in their manager's eyes. So it's really important to give and ask for feedback. And giving it is one thing, asking for it is another. Again, that takes a lot of courage as well. In my experience, it's usually down to 2 or 3 things. Managers often don't make the time, or they don't feel they've got the time, but you've got time for everything. It's about making the time. Sometimes managers don't understand the true value of it for all parties, especially for staff members who want to know how they're going. Or sometimes I've even come across managers who think, wow, I've made a mistake and I can't tell that person off about making that mistake because I've done it, and therefore it's a bit hypocritical. But there are ways of working together and having those discussions together, even if it's like we both seem to be having this issue, how can we support each other, or what can we put in place as a process to lessen the chance of these types of mistakes happening again. Good managers or leaders do encourage employees to come to them with suggestions on things they can do better, or when they see an opportunity. And by creating a culture, we talked about having a psychologically safe workplace in the last session, and that's just the opportunity for 2-way conversations to happen. And that also helps to set up a healthy workplace where uncomfortable conversations are kept to a minimum. But, you know, receiving negative feedback from your employees can be a tough pill to swallow. And if you're not expecting the feedback, sometimes it's easy to get a bit defensive or over-apologise or just get upset. So it's really important to, if you say, look, we're all human, we all make mistakes, let's work on improving this together, then that can be much more helpful. But then from leaders, don't stop that don't let that stop you giving feedback to your staff, because staff do want to know what's working, and by having those conversations, as I mentioned, everybody realises that they're human. There's a lot of, for people who do or want to do performance conversations or appraisals, I get a lot of questions. Should we do it 6 monthly? Should we do it annually? Should we do it more often? What research is showing now is that the more often managers have regular conversations with their staff, and I'm not talking about operational issues, I'm talking about one-on-one with the staff about how they're going, how they're feeling, what you're feeling about how they're going, and just making sure that those communication channels are open. It actually helps flatten out any big issues and addresses them before they get to be bigger than Ben-Hur, essentially. But you have to spend the time doing that. And if you want to do that privately, go and take them, go for a walk around the park and have a conversation. The other thing is, never underestimate, as a business owner or manager, how your staff value the time that you put into speaking to them and finding out about them and talking about how they're going. Most people start work or work for people and they want to know they're doing a good job and they want to do a good job. But often, because we're rushing so much, we don't often take the time, or we're panicking, or we've got our own thoughts going on. We don't think about those other people. So it's really important to take the time to do that. If you do want to have a meeting with a staff member, though, about things, make sure that you tell them why you want to meet with them. Otherwise, they MS you, they make shit up, and they can waste a lot of energy or time worrying unnecessarily. And as I think I have mentioned in a previous webinar, we naturally as humans have 4 negative thoughts to every 1 positive thought. So those of us, or those people that do get anxious or nervous, sometimes they may have more than that 4. So it's really important to tell people, I want to have a conversation with you. You know, I've just noticed you're having a bit of difficulty with this. Let's talk about it. And also I want to talk to you about how well you're doing about that. So it basically becomes, they go, oh, okay, I know what the conversation's about, rather than sweating it for 24, 48 hours or whatever that is. The other thing too, with performance appraisals, if you're a family business and you've got parents and children in your business, and you want to do some conversations with that around their career development or their learning opportunities or their performance. Again, if you're doing performance appraisals for your other staff, I really recommend that you do the same for your family member staff, if they're staff as well. One of my clients has got a business. She's got her son and her daughter that come in and do work with her. We just went through and did performance appraisals for all of her team. And she said, oh, I don't think I need to do my son and my daughter. And I said, well, I disagree. I think it would be really valuable for them, because It's a great idea for them to get experience in having a performance appraisal because they're quite young, and they can learn early in a safer environment rather than feeling worried about it. And also it's important for them to know that you're focused on their growth and development in a structured way as well, not an unstructured way. Like a rubber dinner table. So consider including any family members in any performance appraisals that you do. And remember that a performance appraisal should be a two-way thing. It's how can I help you? This is what I'm thinking about you, but how, so it's a two-way street. And again, people are going to feel more involved in the whole process. Tip 7, leverage other people's talents and strengths. Good leaders have the understanding that we all have strengths and we all have vulnerabilities and areas for development. And as a manager or a business owner, you don't have to have all the answers. And the more you can actually include other team members in the discussions and asking them for their ideas, whether you take them on or not, whether it's a good idea or not, it doesn't matter. Having those conversations and having it open is fantastic because it encourages different people to think, to innovate, and to use their initiative. And they also feel heard, which is a really wonderful way for people keeping people engaged and feeling that they're valuable. Because if I'm feeling superfluous and I'm thinking, well, my boss doesn't think I'm of any value, he or she never takes notice of anything I say or any suggestions I make, they're likely to go, what am I doing here? It's just not of any real value to anybody. So it is important to, and we've often got blind spots and we've done things a certain way for a long time. One of my favourite questions for my clients is, why are you doing this? Is there a reason for it, or is it because it's a ritual? And is it maybe time to change that because things have changed, the environment's changed, the industry's changed, as you guys are under a massive amount of change at the moment. So it really takes a lot of different thinking. And there might be somebody who's got some great ideas that you haven't even thought of. So don't put the pressure on yourself and think you've got to come up with all the ideas, but welcome other input and ideas from other people. The other thing is recognising a job well done and rewarding it appropriately. One of the things that staff often suffer from is feeling that they're not appreciated or recognised, as we've just touched on. And this can come in many ways. It could be being underpaid or not paid equally to meet the market, what's happening. It could be something as simple as not receiving positive feedback for a job well done. It could be broken promises. It could be around rewards, benefit bonuses, valid complaints being shrugged off, and reasonable change suggestions going ignored. And when the leader does ignore that or do this repeatedly, or the team leader, or just the team culture, the environment can feel a bit toxic and a bit unsettled. Because I think it comes back to people feeling disrespected and not valued. And I know a lot of people, a lot of business owners, especially at the moment, you may be feeling uncomfortable about rewards and recognitions because you're struggling financially at the moment, and it's like, well, how else can I reward these people if it's not for money? In the normal run of things, as a manager, getting blindsided by an employee asking for more money can be really awkward and really tricky. And if you are doing performance appraisals, make sure you've thought about, is this actually linking to an increase in the salary or a wage, or am I giving this person a bonus? Because if somebody asks you when you are in a performance appraisal and you haven't thought about that, then that can catch you really unawares. So I would suggest that you always need to be prepared for those types of conversations. And if you can't afford it, or it's not the right time, then you need to be able to say that quite clearly and feel comfortable saying that, because you don't want to be sending your business broke in the normal run of things if you're feeling pressured into giving a wage increase or a reward or a bonus, excuse me, if that's not affordable for the business. So that's where it's really important to plan up front, to have discussions with your accountant and your business partners, whoever, and so if that question does come up, you're prepared. And not everybody's driven by money. So some employees value other incentives or rewards, such as training or upskilling, and there's a lot of that happening at the moment. One of my other clients, we've just done some performance appraisals yesterday, and he's fortunate, he's in bookkeeping business, so his business is going very well at the moment. But what he's doing is recognising that because people are working from home, they're not necessarily able to meet their 75% billable hours because there's so many efficiencies people have gained. So what he's saying is there's a lot of training online. I'd like to discuss with you the training you would like to attend. I'm happy to pay for that in the meantime, but I want you to spend any spare time you do have upskilling for yourself, for your own marketability, as well as for something that can benefit the business in the future. So that is one way. Another one is by giving people extra days off. At the moment, it's again probably not so critical because there's probably people out having more days off than they've ever had before. But in the normal run of things, that's quite a nice thing to do. Flexible work hours, again, something that's not quite so urgent at the moment, potentially for a lot of businesses, but normally that's really helpful. Parking, health insurance, fitness memberships. There's all sorts of different things that people may want or may value. And that's not, and yes, some of it, quite a bit of it has some monetary value for you, but it might be less than having to give a pay rise all the time, because otherwise you can end up keeping on increase. And this is what staff need to understand as well. If a manager or a business is continuing to up pay rates every year or every couple of years, you get to a stage where it's called a golden handcuff, where the staff member is getting paid so well that even if they're unhappy, they can't afford to move on, or the manager's giving so much, it's like we can't afford to give you another pay rise, and so everyone ends up feeling pretty unhappy and dissatisfied. So it's think about other ways of rewarding, and again, even things like thank you, let me take you out for lunch, or let's just go out and have some extra time off can be really helpful. Just be aware of FBT and talk to your accountant, as we said. Tip number 9 is about flexible work, which may seem, as I mentioned, a bit redundant at the moment because many employees are still working from home or working reduced hours. But working from home combined with job insecurity and the desire for staff who are keen to want to do more than anything possible to keep their jobs has the danger of some employees ending up working more hours than they worked before because they don't have the natural boundaries of going to and from work, which limits sometimes their hours. So there is quite a bit of burnout that's happening in a lot of industries at the moment because people are either just desperate to pivot or desperate to save their business, or they're just working incredibly hard because they want to maintain their job. It's still really important for people to understand that you need rest, you need to refresh yourself, and in the normal day, not just through the COVID pandemic time, workplace flexibility is something that people are looking to get and to have in a normal workplace situation. So there is data showing employees and candidates are considering company culture and the expectations of workload seriously when looking at new positions in an effort to evaluate whether they will be expected normally to work 38 or more hours on a regular basis or travel extensively, or even if they can take their leave if and when they want to. So that's why when I talk about flexibility, it can be about all sorts of different, I guess, rights and entitlements that are underpinned by law, but it's also about the employer and the employee having a discussion that meets the employer and the business needs, as well as if you've got a great employee you want to keep, keeps them happy as well. Always a tough thing. Okay, and my last tip today is knowing when to fire somebody, and it may just be the best person that you've got in sales, for example. It might just be one of the hardest things you have to do. But the problem is that if you keep staff who long past the time that they should be going, this can impact the morale of others who are doing the right thing and doing a good job. There are a number of reasons that it can be that it's time for the employee to go, and it's usually due to their performance or their behaviour. And that's why when somebody comes and works for an employer, we normally set up a values-driven behaviour type expectation as well as a technical competency, because you can have somebody who's a fantastic technical salesperson or operational person, but their behaviour is not acceptable. And the problem is that if you don't deal with that in a timely way, then it can really have some negative impacts on the rest of the team. So if your clients don't like these team members, or they're disrespectful or argumentative with you consistently, or they're displaying discriminatory or bullying behaviour to others, it doesn't matter or to you, it doesn't matter how good they are at the technical aspects of their job. If you've had discussions with them about this, but their behaviour persists, this is when you might need to organise to have further discussions with them and know when to fire them. There are ways for people to challenge ideas with respect and in a constructive way, but destructive or disrespectful behaviour is just not acceptable, because this sets up a very toxic and destructive environment when nobody wants to come to work and productivity goes out the window. I know years ago in one of my previous workplaces, we had a very badly behaved employee, and he was a great salesperson, but he sucked everybody's energy up. And when we all got together as a team, we used to spend hours and hours complaining about this guy when we all got together and just wondering how he could still be there. And we just sort of thought, well, why is he there? Why is he a protected species? What's going on here? He was terminated one evening after he took a swing at a boss on a conference. You know, it was just as well, because we were really, a lot of people were starting to feel a lot of loss of respect for management and for the team for allowing him to still be there. So unfortunately, I know this can be a little easier said than done in certain situations, especially if you are in a small town or you're in a family business, and it might be a family, a member or a person who's a friend of yours, or the husband or wife of a close associate. You know, it can be, there's all sorts of complexities around this. So that's where you need to weigh up the pros and cons about the impact on your business versus the impact on the relationship, and deal with that. And so that's where sometimes it's important to be able to get a neutral party to be involved and to help you in the mediation or the discussion about the performance or the attitude or behaviour of this person, because yeah, it can mean that a lot of people stay long past the use by date, and it can cause a real problem for you in your business. The other thing is, you do have a duty of care to the remainder of the staff who are working in your business to ensure that they are in a safe working environment, as well as to yourself, because otherwise you can end up with bullying and harassment claims, and you don't want your business name to be spread all over the front page of the newspaper because of that either. So, you know, we all understand that people, especially at the moment, there's a lot of mental health issues that are really being aggravated by the whole COVID stress and the uncertainty in the environment. But again, if somebody is, or yourself, suffering from mental health issues, this is where it's important to reach out and get some help, either from an employee assistance program, EAP, or from your local GP, or recommend that somebody goes and talks to their GP, because this stuff is about understanding what's bad behaviour, and that's based on just bad behaviour and attitude, versus what's bad behaviour based on anxiety, stress, and something else that might be a mental health related issue. So that's where it's important to have other people that can help you sort through what that might be, and then make a plan from there. So that's my 10 tips. Again, you might be thinking that I've given you a long list of things to do, but I just recommend that you look at all the 10 tips that I have given you, and work out just one or two areas that might be helpful for you, or plan to address one or two areas in the future going forward when you do pick up your business again, or when you might even move into a new business, or have another business that you've already moved into. There is probably a few pieces of low-hanging fruit there that you can actually do pretty quickly. Just remember that this stuff, working with other people, is always going to change. You might just think you've got it perfect, and then one of your key people leaves, you bring somebody new on, and then that upsets the whole apple cart. It's about recognising that when you're dealing with people, this is a journey, it's not a destination. It's never going to stay the same, and it's really important to continue to be thinking, well, what else do I need to change, or what do I need to improve, do more of, do less of, throw in before, Russian brothers, rid of, toss in, I've forgotten the other ones, but you get the idea. So it's really important to think about that. But once again, thank you for listening to me, letting me present, and I hope there's been some valuable tips for you. And again, feel free to reach out at any time. There's some hopefully we've got some questions in the question box at the moment. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any of those, as well as provide some guidelines for you if you like.
Thanks, Jo. Absolutely
Jo.
valuable. And I've had quite a few people comment on here saying thank you. So they've obviously found it also valuable. Just so you guys know, the webinar has been recorded, and we will put the recording and the slides so that you can access those top 10 tips and revise and go back over them. They will be on the AFTR website. Under the events navigation, there is a webinar option, and under there is all the recordings that we do. So this will definitely be up there.
Jo, I've got like documents or notes that I actually have on hand that I used as a referral. I find that if I have notes, it keeps me on track. Otherwise, I can talk for hours on all this stuff. So that's why I generally have notes. So if anybody would particularly like to have a copy of those notes, look, I'm really happy to share that too at the moment. I'm so aware that there's so many of you that are having a really tough time, and it's about doing what I can to help you. And so if you would like some more detail, and if anybody would like to reach out for a conversation, I genuinely am happy to have just a complimentary chat if there's one or two particular issues that that might help you in the short term and there's nobody else that you can talk to.
Thanks, Jo. That's very generous, and that offer's very kind. Can we put the notes on the slide, those notes on the slides on the website? Are you happy for us to do that?
I'd probably rather people text or ask you for those, because there is quite a bit of my IP in that, so I am happy to share with individuals. So,
I'm going to get inundated with hundreds of emails from people, so perhaps
sorry.
It's okay, but perhaps I can give them your email so that they can email you directly.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, gosh, I haven't even got my email on there. But, yeah, it's jo@mindyourpeas.com.au. So, yeah, very, very happy to do that too.
Great. I'm just going to put it in the chat box, Jo's email. So, sending that to you all now. Please have a look in the chat box and confirm that you can all see that email. Grab it off there, keep it on record, and please ask Jo if you do want that complimentary chat or anything else she can help you with. I've got lots of positive comments coming in, Jo, but no questions. Anybody we've got her on hand? Want to ask her anything? We've got a few minutes left.
There's probably some people who'd love to ask questions, but maybe they don't feel comfortable doing it right now. So, that's where, as I mentioned, I'm just really happy to be able to do what I can to support you guys. So do feel free to reach out and link it. Don't forget, we've got that prize book. I don't know if I'm still on camera, but I am the problem. Fantastic. So if I haven't looked on my LinkedIn, so somebody may already have claimed it, but it's a fantastic book, and I read that and I went, oh my God, I should have written that book. I actually contacted the author and said to her, you've written my book. But yeah, so it was really great. I really appreciate the time that you've all taken to listen. I hope that has been of value. It sounds like there's been some positive feedback. Thank you. And yeah, awesome.
I have one question.
I think next week
coming, Jo.
Oh, yep, cool.
So this person's asked, is there one behaviour of managers that constantly comes up when they look at themselves? Well, that's a really interesting question.
Wow, it's very multifaceted, that. I think a lot of it is when we are, is there one behaviour? Yes, I would probably say one behaviour that comes up is that it can be scary for us to look at ourselves and think, how am I contributing to this? But then there's also understanding where to draw the line between what buttons of mine are being pushed, which is why I'm responding, and what behaviour should remain with that person, and that needs to be dealt with, because I think what often happens is that managers can be very self-critical as well. We're human beings, and we often turn the mirror around and go, oh my God, this is all your fault, when we're looking at ourselves, but it's not always our fault. So it's about understanding what is something that we can change, and what can we control, and what can we change, and what is it that we need to address with that other person, because sometimes it can be even easier for us to be blaming ourselves rather than gathering the courage up to deal with an issue with somebody else. So I think a large part of it, and that's a very roundabout answer to your question, but it's about understanding when I can control and what I need to do differently versus what I need to ask somebody else to do differently, and then working out how to address that. So a lot of it's about how can I address this behaviour of somebody else's when it's their issue, and still feel good about myself, because a lot of managers feel very concerned. They want to be liked. We want to be liked. We want to do a good job, most of us, and we want our staff to be happy. But sometimes cutting staff free and saying, maybe it is time to move on might be the best thing to do. So,
yeah, great advice.
Very long. Probably a long-winded answer to your question.
No, it's great advice. And one thing that I've always lived by is seek first to understand. So in your interactions, always look for a win-win situation. And the reason it's important to seek first to understand is that two people can look at the same situation and have a completely different perspective or interpretation of that situation. And that's influenced by our values, our education, our upbringing, so many filters that we put over, and we all create our own movie in our mind. So first ask.
I'm just looking for an example. So if I hold that up in front of you and say, tell me what you describe, or tell me what you're seeing, you tell me what you're seeing, and I go, no, that's not what you're seeing. This is what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking from that side. You're looking from that side. I'm looking from this side. We're describing the same thing, but we're seeing it from different points of view. So that's a really great analogy to use to explain that. And that's where diversity is really important. But it's also about having an open mind. So one of the other things that leaders really need is to have an open mind and recognise that we don't have to have all the answers, but other people do have ideas and answers too, and we need to be humble enough, I guess, to be open to that. But just because you listen to that idea and that suggestion doesn't then mean you have to rush off and do it, otherwise you're disappointing that person. Sometimes it's just being heard and given the opportunity to have input and to discuss it is really what that other person or other people want.
Yeah, absolutely. And collaboration in the workplace is so much more rewarding. And because we all have different skill sets, just think of the capacity and wonderful output that you can have by having different perspectives. So, yeah, really great question. I've got another question here. What suggestions, Jo, would you have about bringing people back to the workplace when they've been working from home for around 3 months? That's a big transition to come back to the workplace. And in fact, should we go back to the workplace?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think that's actually part of the discussion. Is, if you are bringing people back to the workplace, why are you bringing people back to the workplace? Is it because you want that social connection and you're feeling disconnected as a business leader? Is it that you're feeling that people are starting to get burnt out, or are some people saying, when can we come back to work because we hate working from home, we have got enough space, or it's not safe, or whatever that situation is? And therefore, I think the first question is, why would we come back to the workplace? And if so, when will we come back to the workplace? Because as a business leader, you've also got to think, am I going to have people coming back to work and they're going to be sitting around and doing nothing, or are they actually going to be involved in doing something meaningful? What a lot of businesses are doing is reaching out and actually interviewing their staff and saying, or getting somebody else to do some interviews and saying, how are you feeling working from home? What's working for you? What's not working for you? If we were going to go back to the workplace, is there any worries, concerns, questions, suggestions that you can make when we're coming back into the workplace to help you feel more comfortable? because it may just be that some people are so freaked out because they've been tucked away in their own homes for so long that they're thinking that anybody they look at is likely to pass on a germ, which is a really sad situation to be in. But then you'll find others are going, I just can't wait to get back to work because I miss my friends, I miss the hubbub, I miss the collaboration, the physical collaboration, because it's one thing to collaborate on Zoom or Teams or whatever, but then it's something completely different to be able to collaborate face to face. And I know when I went back and had a meeting with my one client, my first client, after a couple of months, and went, oh my God, I'm seeing them in 3D, not 2D. This is so exciting.
I think you're frozen, Joe. Just why Joe's frozen, did you all manage to get her email address? Maybe you could just use the question toolbox to just say yes so I can see that you've got that, or even in the chat box. And
it's about having the reason why you'd go back. It's Jackie. Talking to your staff about, as I mentioned, asking some of those questions.
You're cutting out on us, Joe, unfortunately. Joe's coming to us from Lake Macquarie, so...
No, I'm actually up in just south of Newcastle. I'm just south of Newcastle. So just quickly, I can't even remember what I was saying now. When did you lose me?
Quite a while ago.
Oh, was it? Oh gosh. Okay. So yeah, I think it's A, why would we come back? B, asking questions of your team and finding out how they're feeling about coming back. And C, a number of my clients that I'm helping come back to work are having like a mixed model. So some staff want to come back and work full time in the office, or however many hours there's, for the full hours that they work. Others are wanting to work some from home and some from the office. And it's about, I guess, understanding the needs of the business. And if you do need people back in the business, in the shop front, it's actually being clear about why you need them back in the shop front. And I think going forward, it's going to be interesting when job seeker and job keeper bind up for some people. Possibly not for people in your industry for a while yet. But I know that a number of employers are finding it really hard to speak to their casuals, to get their casuals to come back to work because they're being paid to stay at home, literally. So I think it's on a case-by-case situation, and it really. But I think those first two tips are important. But then if you've got staff and you really do need them to be there for a genuine reason, and they just refuse to come back, then I think probably in another month, 2 months or whatever, there's going to probably be a wave of having to let people go because you need them back and there's a justifiable reason and they refuse to come. So I think there's going to be a bit of that happen a little further down the track.
Great. And I think, Joe, you might have some of our members up in Newcastle way who are really close to you reach out. And
Yep, absolutely. So I physically work between Newcastle and Sydney. So anybody between Newcastle and Sydney, if you want to reach out and have a coffee or something, feel free to do that.
Amazing. Thank you. Well, guys, let's all thank Jo for her expertise and her time today. We actually have a topic that is an extension of today, next Wednesday, which is all about effective communication. So if you enjoyed today, please make sure you register for that webinar next week. Let me just share the registration link with you all now in the chat group. Guys, copy this link down and register for that. So Jo's coming back next Wednesday, the 30th at 11 a.m. and it's all about effective communication. Let me also just send this around. So grab that registration.
So can I also Jo, can I also just ask all your the audience out here, if you have got any specific questions that you would like me to address for next week, feel free to send those up front, either to Jo or to me, because it is important for me to also, especially if there are some specific situations or questions, I would really like to be able to answer some of your questions specifically rather than just me burbling on for that 45 minutes or so. Yeah, so please feel free to send in any specific questions or challenges or issues you're having around communication, and let's see what we can do about addressing those too.
Yeah, great offer. Thank you, Jo. The last thing I want to mention is that next Wednesday as well is the last Wednesday of the month. So after is having our after monthly update. We were doing it weekly, now we're doing it monthly. So that'll be 2 o'clock next Wednesday, so in the afternoon. So we've got Joe in the morning and then the after wrap up in the afternoon. And that'll be Naomi, Courtney, Darren and myself giving you an update of everything that's happened throughout the month of September. Following this webinar, guys.
Scary, isn't it?
Oh, I know, it's crazy.
Scary.
I don't know where the year's gone, and I'm sure you all
And then we've got
neither.
And then we've got daylight saving starting the weekend after that.
Yeah. So
For those of us that don't live in Queensland.
Yeah. We'll finish the webinar here, but please complete the quick webinar survey that will pop up on your screen when we end the webinar. Jo would really appreciate that. I send the feedback through to her and it just asks you how she presented, how relevant it is to you, is it going to help your business? So it'll literally take 30 seconds to fill out that. So please do that for Jo. And
Thank you. I really appreciate the feedback.
Hope to see you all next Wednesday at 11 a.m. with Jo Hanlon.
You'll be sick of me by then.
No, we love it.
Thank you so much again, guys.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.